Talking happy talk. Talk about things you'd like to do. You've got to have a dream. If you don't have a dream, how you gonna have a dream come true?
Hello, my name is Rachel Chavkin, and I am recording this brief introduction just to welcome you as the inaugural guest on the Hop to Broadway. So you're going to see a conversation that I had when I was up with my company, The Team, working on research for a new piece that we're making called Reconstruction. And we got to speak with some extraordinary members of the Dartmouth faculty and community. And it was an extraordinary week of getting to sort of access academic resources of a college campus at its finest. And then equally, I've spent time on the Dartmouth campus as a freelance director via the New York Theater Workshop Summer Residency Program, where I was up in 2014 developing Hadestown, of course now on Broadway. And this is what me and my fabulous host, John Heginbotham, were fortunate enough to talk about Hadestown and Reconstruction and sort of all the work in between Broadway and the experimental reaches. And that's what we're sharing here with you now. So thanks for watching. Here we go.
Live from Hanover, New Hampshire. Welcome to the first ever episode of Hop to Broadway with John Heginbotham. And now, John's here!
Cool. Thank you all so much for coming today out in the freezing cold. Welcome. I'm John Heginbotham. I am the director of the Dartmouth Dance Ensemble. I'm also a lecturer in the Department of Theater. And I was a Broadway choreographer. We just closed on Sunday. But it still goes on my resume. So this is our first ever talk show, Hop to Broadway, where we will be having a conversation with guests who are involved in cutting edge theater, commercial theater, Broadway theater. And our first ever guest is the amazing and completely fascinating and spectacular Tony Award-winning director, Rachel Chavkin. Nice, thank you.
That was quite an introduction. Lights.
I just found that song yesterday.
It's really good.
They were like, how about some entrance music?
Yeah, it's good.
And I was like, what about that?
That's your new theme song.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good.
So listen, as part of our inaugural first talk, and also I'm going to treat this more as like an out-of-town tryout.
Oh my God.
A little bit.
Okay, great.
So I'm going to let you all know, we're just going to have a conversation, okay? And the conversation is going to last for 1 hour. And at the end of that hour, Rachel is going to disapparate and go, I think, to New York City.
That's true.
So it's a hard 6:30. And I'm now going to remove this jacket.
No.
Oh, really?
It's really good.
Okay, but one of my mistakes is that I forgot to take out my wallet.
Oh.
I'm just going to put this here.
It's bad for your spine.
Yeah, it makes my leg fall asleep.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm filming. Okay. I think I'm good to go.
Yeah,
How are you
I'm
doing?
ready.
Okay.
I feel warm, feel excited.
Well, maybe one other thing that is important to say is that you literally are just walking out of a rehearsal.
I just finished my last rehearsal here for this show, Reconstruction, that my company is working on. And now I'm going to go back to New York.
Rachel has been in residence for the last week,
Yeah,
I think.
since last Tuesday.
Since last Tuesday, working on this new piece with her ensemble, which is called The Team. And we're gonna delve deep into what you're doing.
Oh, great.
Or as deep as you'd like to go.
Sure. Yeah.
And but we're gonna do that in just a moment.
Okay.
What I'd like to do is I wonder if you could just tell all of us a little something about how are you here?
Like, how do we end up at Dartmouth? Or
Or
the fact that I'm wearing a sweater
all
and spandex?
all of the above is welcome, but you're a theater artist.
I'm a theater artist.
How? Why?
Oh, I see. Boy. Why am I a theater artist? I was a soccer player and not a very good one. Like I wasn't on club teams or anything, but that's what I grew up doing. And so I really loved groups and companies of ladies in particular. And I grew up in DC, and I grew up getting taken to a lot of theater. And those two things were very separate. And then I went to a summer camp that was very, very cliquey. So I have a lot of ambivalence about that summer camp, but also I would not be in theater without that place. It was called Stage Door Manor. And I did theater there for 6 years and fell madly in love with it. And then right before going to school, I cried and was like, I think I want to study theater. And my boyfriend was like, that's okay.
Great.
And then it's an absolutely straight line. It's not a straight line, but I've been doing theater really nonstop since I was 18.
Right.
Yeah.
And when you had this kind of moment of crisis of I want to do theater, was that something that like literally it was like happened in a second, in one night?
In my memory, we were sitting in his incredibly beat up Taurus, and I remember in my memory I was just like suddenly crying and was like, I think I want to go to school for theater. And I don't know actually why that made me cry.
Well, it was a significant moment, and you somehow your body recognized that.
Yeah, totally.
And so you went to school. You went to NYU.
I did, which was fantastic.
And did you go with the idea, did you already know, I'm in theater, I'm going to be a writer, director?
I didn't know the writer part, but I did choose NYU and Playwrights Horizon and Theater School within NYU very specifically because I heard about the program for 5 minutes and that you could act and direct at the program. And I knew I was bossy. Like that, I had always been bossy.
Okay.
And I was, I went to not a very strong high school. I mean, it was a wonderful high school, but like academically, it was not excellent, which meant I had a lot of time to just do extracurricular activities because I would not say I had to work so hard.
Sure.
So I was like editor of a bunch of stuff and was by the senior year, co-captain of the soccer team. So I like knew that leadership was appealing, and I had directed one act, The Actor's Nightmare, and I did not understand a single one of Christopher Durang's jokes, and I made up whole new jokes, and I think it was probably horrendous, but I loved it, and so I did go to NYU very specifically to do both acting and directing. Okay. And then almost left directing and then came back to it very hardcore again and again and again.
Okay, hold that thought for 1 second. We are at an institution of higher learning right now. I'm just going to say, so Christopher Durang's The Actor's Nightmare was a show that ran off Broadway for many, many years. And it was paired with Sister Mary Ignatius Explains It.
That might be true.
For us all.
I did not do my dramaturgical research when I was 16.
But it's like it's quite a sophisticated play.
Not as I directed it.
I mean, that sounds kind of fantastic.
I think there were a lot of pratfalls that I put in.
So you were goofy at the time.
Yeah, I
That's
guess
great.
so.
Were you laughing? Like in the direction, like you were making yourself
I guess so.
Amused by it.
Yeah. There were a lot of pants dropping. Yeah, they were like funny. I mean, I kind of knew what Noel Coward was like, but I don't think I'd ever read a Noel Coward play.
Sure.
Like, it's like the depth to which you have to know what he's referencing and riffing off of is so deep. And like, we didn't have a theater teacher, really. There was a lovely faculty advisor who was a science teacher, But again, it was not a school that like it was just not a resource-laden school, and so it
Sure.
was just very scrappy.
So you made your own resources.
Made a bunch of different jokes. Yeah.
And so what's interesting, it's interesting to hear you say that you went away from directing and came back to it.
Yeah.
Why?
I mean, I really loved performing. I loved it. And I loved training as a performer. I encountered first the viewpoints and then a fairly counter postmodern improv technique with a choreographer in Amsterdam, because I was living and studying in Amsterdam in the summer of 2000. And there was this mad woman named Katie Duck who actually, like, she was really freaked out because viewpoints, if you don't know it, it's a physical improvisational form, basically. And it typically involves soft focus, meaning kind of looking and seeing everything, but not like hard looking at anyone. And Katie was like, "What are you doing? Where are you looking? Where are you? Your eyes." And she was really pissed. So there was like a lot of different thought about that, but I just loved thinking with my body in that way.
Okay.
But I had started making my own work while I was a sophomore at school through a class called COW, which stood for Creating Original Work. And so I just kept coming back to it.
And while you were in this experience with Katie Duck,
Yeah.
And she's telling you things like, where are your eyes, don't have the soft focus. Yeah. Are you able to agree with her on that for the project, or
Oh, I was
resistant to it?
exhilarated by her. Oh, she was one of the meanest teachers I ever had, and it was exhilarating in the way that I imagine maybe students here, those who remember when they were students, when a teacher expected like the ceiling of you, that was very elevating. Yeah.
Should we have the rest of this conversation with soft focus? Just be like,
That would be oh my God.
Rachel.
John, I just don't, yeah, oh God, didn't you go into
Are you still
kinesthetic response
here?
break?
Are you already back in New York? Okay.
I love
But
that.
another thing that you've said that's very fascinating to me is you said you knew you were bossy. And you're a founding member of this collective.
Yes.
Which I am also just learning about myself, the team. And I was able to sit in on your incredible presentation a couple days ago where you shared some of your work with us. And my impression is that there's quite a lot of conversation and collaboration in the room.
Yeah, the team is, I've described us as aggressively inefficient, actually.
Love that so much.
Because we are a consensus-driven organization.
So being a bossy person, how does that,
I know.
Are you okay?
It's a weird, so I have had great swings in my life, in the life of the team, which is now 15 years old, of needing, feeling like I don't exist, needing to get as far away from the functioning of the team as possible, needing respite from that, that world, whatever that outside world is, to just be in a room where like it's conversation, and it's like a Ouija board is sometimes how I've thought about our process. It's like we all have our hands on the puck, and you sometimes really don't know who's moving it. Wow. Which is cool. Yeah, but it's different impulses, definitely.
I would guess then you must have to trust the people in the room quite a lot.
Yeah, definitely. And vice versa. Like, I think there is the expectation. A student who came asked a really sweet question that was basically like, how do you make good devised theater?
Right.
And I think the answer in part, it's definitely not the whole answer, but in part is you have to really love the work of the artists. Like, not the artists themselves, so that helps, but you have to love the work that they do. And I do. Like, genuinely, most of the writing that came out of just this past week of being here was just like thrilling.
That's so cool. I sort of have an impulse that now might be a great time to just give an example of some of the work of the team.
Sure.
So I'm going to ask, hey, Diane, could you please cue up Mission Drift? And we're going to see a 5-minute scene from a play, I believe from 2014.
2011.
Even better.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
So this is, 2004 is when the team was founded.
Yeah.
So this is,
This was like our 7th or 8th work, and I can talk more about it now or later, but.
Let's watch
do
the
it
clip.
later.
And in fact, I'm not even going to say anything about the clip. We're just going to watch it, and then we'll either discuss it or we'll completely shift gears and move on to something totally different and not even acknowledge that it
Okay,
happened.
awesome. Stop focus. John?
How old are you?
14.
So am I. What's in your bag?
Back
I
off.
want to know what you chose to bring.
Seeds, a couple coins, tulip bulbs.
For trade.
Yes, I purchased 5 right before the boom.
That's very practical.
Well, I'm very practical. Now, would you please?
You have nice teeth.
Thanks. Can I? You have nice teeth too.
Thank you. This one is silver.
Oh, you're tall.
5'11" 3/4.
Is your family sickly?
Oh, my grandparents live past 70.
Cool. What'd you bring?
Honestly, not a lot.
Oh,
And I've not yet met my cousin. But I am a man of faith.
yes?
I am taking this step with tremendous faith in the life to come. I will honor you as my wife and respect you as my partner in this,
Leap.
this venture.
Adventure.
My name is Joris Rapalja.
Yours, Rapalja?
Will you,
Catalina.
Catalina, will you marry me?
Take me to a rock.
Yes.
If there's any luck, I want it on my own. Brick, 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 build your box. 'Cause I've worked hard to build it and make it on my own. Catalina and yours did it right there. Got married right there on the dock. They took one step onto that leaky boat and they looked west. Now, this is back when even the east was the west, and we couldn't wait to put our footprints all over it. Take me to the start. The boats, the leagues, the starboard, point me close to home. Brick, brick, brick in the heart. Yes, yes, it will progress till the getting's done. The trip took 4 months. Catalina and yours played cards, told dirty jokes, drank beer, ate biscuits. 12 people died, 1 baby was born. Joy and fear and sweat and tears, all in anticipation of that great green unknown. The dead roll over and get lost in the wake, and Catalina,
I'm pregnant!
The only way to avoid this shipwreck, we must be close knit together in this work as one man.
and to hide, walk you west of, look you up higher, look you low, catch
It's massive.
I pictured more people.
There are plenty of people out there.
No, I meant Dutch people. I think I'm gonna be sick.
Catalina, look at me. Look at me. This is happening.
It is.
You are here.
I'm here. It's beautiful.
It's unbelievable. Catalina, this is unbelievable.
So, Hadestown.
Do it.
No, but I do want to say one thing.
Yeah.
Which is Sydney still here? Sydney Stowe? Sydney, have you ever thought about putting the movie screen behind the audience? This is just so much fun to watch, like this. Sydney is the director of film here.
Spatial.
If we show another clip, you and I are going to move to these seats.
Great.
Potentially.
Okay, I'm with you.
So this is a 5-minute example
Yeah.
of a much longer work, I think around 2 hours maybe.
Yeah, yeah.
There's so much in it already, and I will say, when we were talking about maybe showing a clip, this is something, recommended. And would you like to talk at all about what we just saw?
Sure. I mean, yeah, as you say, there's so much in it. So, like, the team is very, and this is, I think, as when you're working in like the generative artist field, by which I mean certainly playwrights are generative artists, but like in the ensemble world or the choreographic, particularly like experimental realms of both, I think the artists who are working there are doing so in part because they want to work in the way that suits them versus like a process that someone has engineered. So the team's work is very, very research-based, in part because a lot of us like to think about large things and make work about large themes. And we actually often begin from theme versus character, almost always. And so Mission Drift began with me asking the company to think about what defines American capitalism specifically versus capitalism as it took shape anywhere else in the world. And something that an Australian friend said to me, she's older and works in public health in Australia. She's a really fascinating woman. And she was like, well, there's capitalism everywhere. It's just you all are much more religious about it. So we were thinking, when we first started research, we thought about religion, which of course kind of got us onto the Puritans for a while. And then I was talking with another colleague, Linda Chapman, at New York Theater Workshop, and she was like, our capitalist roots aren't the Puritans, it's the Dutch. And she pointed me to this book called The Island at the Center of the World by Russell Shorto, which is an incredible book about the New Amsterdam colony, what eventually became New York, and talks about how multicultural it was, how like absolutely hell-bent on capital it was, and Catalina and Joris Rapalje are the two names that open the second chapter of that book, and they're considered the Dutch Adam and Eve. So out of that research came those characters. And then Heather, the singer, who is also the composer, we got very passionate about Las Vegas from Jake Margolin, one of our company members, who's like, I want to check out Las Vegas. Not so much because of the gambling metaphor, but because it had been the fastest growing city in America at the turn of the millennium, and then had become the epicenter of the housing collapse. And you find all this out over the course of the play. And so basically we kind of created these characters of these two capitalist gods that what you just saw is the origin story of Catalina and Joris being these like idealistic teenagers on the dock in Amsterdam sailing west. And then they become immortal, basically, and conquer the country and get into awful wars and do terrible things and brutalize the continent and people across the continent and sort of become this horrendous spirit of manifest destiny. And the image that we used, which is how they got the costumes that they're wearing, it was originally they were in period clothing, and it was terrible. And everyone was acting weird, like we couldn't figure out how to do them. And then I thought about natural-born killers.
Right.
And so actually that kind of crazy blonde wig that she's wearing is an homage to Juliette Lewis and Natural Born Killers. And Joris in that like sad sort of classic, this is not a nice term, but I can't think of a better one, like kind of Euro white trash outfit of like what my Glaswegian friends would call a Ned, a non-educated delinquent.
Okay.
So that's that costume.
So, okay, that's fascinating because it sounds like you walk into the room, at least with this piece.
Yeah.
You
Sorry,
start
that was
with
so long.
No, that was
Yeah.
great. You start with a big question. And then your question leads you to very specific information, but humongous ideas, immortality and the state of the world in terms of capitalism.
Yeah.
But you're also drawing inspiration from Natural Born Killers, you know, a commercial, popular film, Oliver Stone. Is everything fair game?
Yeah, I mean, I think we would like shy back from something that felt appropriative or demeaning if we were like demeaning something that didn't want to go through this lens in some way. We wouldn't access it. But yeah, I remember early on a friend described our work as Gertrude Stein meets MTV.
Oh,
and
great,
that is
great.
like a description that we held on to for a long time.
That's great.
Yeah.
And are you describing a typical process for the team?
Yeah, very much. Like, again, the starting points will be totally different. We actually did make a show called Rose of Elvis. That was just a duet for two actresses. That totally started with, let's look at Teddy Roosevelt and Elvis Presley. And we actually didn't know if that would be two solo shows that would like go in the same night or interlock in some way. And it ended up absolutely being a full narrative. Yeah.
Well, we also have a brief clip of a sort of a promo for Rose of Elvis.
Oh, yeah.
Diane, do you mind?
I didn't know we had that. That's great.
That's on your website.
Yeah. Yeah.
Would you mind talking a little bit more about that?
So that was Kristen C., who is here this week actually for Reconstruction, and Libby King. Libby as Elvis and Kristen as Teddy Roosevelt. Oh God, what to say? So in brief, these were each of those men was a long obsession of each of those two actresses. And I said we should do something where you play and you play. And pretty quickly we discovered that Elvis kept on his wall Teddy Roosevelt's "Man in the Arena" quote, and then Libby very early on, probably at the outset, was like, I'm not sure if I'm playing Elvis or if I'm playing an Elvis impersonator. And pretty quickly that became, because we had been in Las Vegas for Mission Drift. We actually moved to Las Vegas for a month for research for Mission Drift. And while there, saw a bunch of remarkable Elvis impersonators. And so we began developing this Russian doll, basically, where Libby was playing actually the central character, who is not in that trailer at all, who is I would say kind of an emergingly queer meatpacking plant worker in South Dakota, who I think if you asked, whose name is Anne, and I think if you asked Anne, Anne would say their pronoun is Elvis. And Elvis, of course, was this very strange, the reading about him is very moving. And he at like 14 he saw in this store and his family had no money. And he saw this pink bolero jacket. And he was like, I have to wear that jacket. And he bought it. So, and it seems like a lot of the writing about Elvis is that when he first fell in love with Priscilla, she was 14. And I think he was 19. And someone said much, much later on in Elvis's life that 14 was a magic age for him, which is very eerie, obviously, thinking about the women that he was drawn to. But I think there is also, seems to be a real strong indication that like he didn't really mature much past 14. So there's this strange slipperiness to him and where he lies on the gender spectrum. And then he idolized Teddy Roosevelt, who was as like patrician, oppressive, Victorian, masculine, ideal, right, like Rough Rider as you get. And so what began to emerge was this like piece about who is a hero. And so we began talking a lot about Thelma and Louise. And so that footage we actually shot on an 8-day road trip that we took, me, Libby, Kristen, Andrew Schneider, our cinematographer, and then Kevin Horgan, who is our assistant director. And the 5 of us got into an RV in Rapid City, South Dakota, and drove from Rapid City to Memphis, to Graceland. And we drove through the Badlands, so we really thought about it as a road trip from the Badlands to Graceland. And we were probably filming like 14 hours a day. I mean, it was a mad thing. We would just like get out and it would be like, put on your costumes. They would run around in character and just fuck around, basically. And so we got all of this beautiful footage that we then wove through the show and that ultimately intercut with some Thelma and Louise footage. Yeah, so it was a work about like who gets to be a hero in America.
So it sounds though that the impetus for the project was your knowing that the 2 actresses had
Totally
these
wanted to work on those 2 characters.
And the big question came from, I guess, listening to them?
Yeah, and watching them. Like the minute they began, we started our very first day of rehearsal, like in silence for about 2 hours while they just put on their drag. And it was you know, you couldn't stop watching it. And it was just like, well, there's the whole piece.
And okay, so then why wasn't that the whole piece?
I don't know, we complicate everything. Because we're not a dance company. As much as Kristen would like us to be a dance company. I don't know, it could have been the whole piece.
Oh, so interesting. Okay, so many, many questions.
Yeah.
By the way, do you see this? Do you see this? These are all potential questions.
Great.
Have I at any point, right?
You may have been soft focus reading them.
Rachel? Okay, so question 1 about that.
Yeah.
You're making this sort of film on your road trip.
Yeah.
The film ends up being part of the piece. I know you as a theater director with a lot of media involved.
Yeah, yeah.
Is film,
Oh yeah,
it's interesting to you?
it's beginning to happen.
Okay, like is there a world where you would make a film?
Yes,
Are you making a film?
hopefully.
Okay.
Yeah, hopefully there's one that I'm like supposed to fly to LA for in the coming weeks to begin casting. So yeah.
Okay, oh, so it's far enough along that there's reality starting to creep in.
There's some level of reality.
Okay.
I think film is just different. I'm learning a lot actually about, I think many skills will be transferable, but like I'm learning on a very basic level about like the metabolism of film production.
Okay.
Yeah, and how we move. It's just different than theater.
New question related. We're going to step back for a moment. You had a 4-week residency in Las Vegas.
Yes.
Now, I'm coming from the world of contemporary concert dance.
Yeah.
So, like a residency like that is essentially like billions of dollars in my psychologically
No
to
money.
me, or no money. So how do you make something like that happen?
I mean, I basically cold wrote to the head of the UNLV theater department
Okay.
and explained what we were doing. And this was at the height of the recession, and Las Vegas, if you don't, I mean, it was a disaster. So he was very clear, like they had no money, but they had space, and they were able to give us their black box for a month. And I was able to get housing, which turned out to be 2 foreclosed homes. We drove up and there was a letter on the door with blue tape, and but they were in 2 very nearby modern developments, half of which weren't finished, and I would say 1/3 of which was occupied. I mean, I could go on and on. Like we opened the garage to the house that I was staying in, and it was, I'm not kidding, it was a carpet of dead crickets. So the city was this terrifying, like the desert had just begun taking its land back. And I, we fundraised, we write everyone and ask for $20 or however much money over the course of the year, and that becomes the one thing that we're doing that year.
Wow. Okay. And you're also doing, it seems like a lot of your work is generated through college or university residencies, like the one that has just happened here.
Yeah. I think that's very like the economy of a lot of experimental performances. That.
May I ask you a question about this residency?
Yeah.
Which is so most of you were not at this presentation a few days ago, but essentially what happened is you welcomed us into your circle in a room in the Hopkins Center and read through what I believe is stuff that you had written during the course of that week.
True.
And we were all together for about an hour and a half. And is it helpful in any way to have a group of strangers come in sort of to witness your process?
I think you always experience the material immediately differently, painfully so often, like at the first preview or in the garage at the Hop. Yeah, definitely.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm really gonna seriously switch gears now.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm trying to think of something like so off topic that it would like blow all of our minds, but I couldn't come up with it because everything's connected. So I'd like to talk for a moment about Hadestown.
Sure.
So we've seen some examples of earlier work that you have been a part of in a big way. And now this year, which has been I would guess a seismic year for you.
2019 was a big year. Yeah.
Rachel, do you mind if I speak for you for a moment?
Go for it.
Rachel directed a new musical called Hadestown, which won the Tony Award for Best Musical this year. Rachel won Best Director Tony Award, and the journey here has been since 2014.
Yeah, Aeneas and I began working together in 2013 on it, and Aeneas had begun writing it in 2006.
with the idea that it would be a theater piece?
Originally, it was a theater piece. This is a common misconception.
Okay.
And then because she was a musician, it like caught footing in the music world and became the concept album. That was the recording of basically the songs of the performance art piece that had been evolving.
Okay.
With like puppets, like Ben Matchstick, who was the original co-conceiver and director of the early work, was a big bread and puppet guy. So I think it was like pretty far out, and it was happening in like community centers around Vermont.
Wow.
Yeah.
Surely there is footage of this.
Yeah.
Okay,
There's a
this is
DVD somewhere.
Good to know for future
Yeah.
times. Okay, so Hadestown has undergone many iterations, but back to your incredible year, so not only this giant achievement, you also gave birth.
I did. I had a baby for my friends.
I'm just going to recommend to everybody. So before this talk, I was like looking up stuff about you, which I'm going to say is okay because we were going to have this talk in an official capacity.
Yeah.
So it was okay that I did that. But you wrote this really beautiful article for British Vogue.
Yeah.
Sort of talking about your experience, why you did it, how it came to be, and we're not going to read that aloud right now in this room, but check it out, British Vogue, what it meant for you to be a surrogate. And we may once again get back to that.
Sure.
But could we cue up, please, the clip of Hadestown?
Clip it is.
Let's not talk about hard times. Pull the wine, it's summertime. Right now we're living it. Living it up. My brother, right here, we're living it. Well, I'm living it up on top. Who makes the summer sunshine bright? That's right, Persephone. Who makes the fruit of the vine get ripe? Persephone, that's me. Who makes the flowers bloom again in spite of a man? Who is doing the best she can? Persephone, that's you. All I know is you're someone I have always known, and I don't even know you now. I wanna hold you close. I don't wanna ever have to let you go. Suddenly the sunlight, bright and warm. Suddenly I'm holding the world in my arms.
Everybody hungry, everybody tired, everybody slain for the sweat of his brow. The wage is nothing and the work is hard. It's a graveyard in Hadestown. Way down, Hadestown, way down under the ground.
I'm coming, wait for me. I hear the walls repeating, the falling of my feet, and it sounds like drumming. And I am not alone. I hear the rocks and stones echoing my song. I'm coming. I'm coming, wait for me. I hear the walls repeating, the falling of our feet, and it sounds like drumming. And we are not alone. I hear the rocks and stones echoing our song. I'm coming.
Oh my God. Wow. Literally like chills just from that. It was really beautiful. Could we show one more clip right away, which is, could we please show the Tony's speech?
Oh, boy.
Spoiler alert, Tony's speech.
Thank you to my beautiful husband and our friends and families, both my folks who are here tonight, and my grandparents who are not, and our entire family out in Iowa. Thank you to the entire Hadestown family, on stage and off stage at the Walter Kerr, past and present, from Vermont to downtown in Canada and London. Thank you to our relentless creative team and every single assistant and associate who has touched this show, and to all the theaters who supported us over the years and years, and to our producers who believed along with us that the music and the message of this show needed to be heard. And thank you most of all to Anais Mitchell. I watched the show again 2 nights ago and was undone all over again by the beauty of your vision for the world and how we heal ourselves through song and through each other. My folks raised me with the understanding that life is a team sport, and so is walking out of hell. That's what is at the heart of the show. It's about whether you can keep faith when you are made to feel alone. And it reminds us that that is how power structures try to maintain control, by making you feel like you're walking alone in the darkness, even when your partner is right there at your back. And this is why I wish I wasn't the only woman directing a musical on Broadway this season. There are so many women who are ready to go. There are so many artists of color who are ready to go, and we need to see that racial diversity and gender diversity reflected in our critical establishment too. This is not a pipeline issue. It is a failure of imagination by a field whose job is to imagine the way the world could be. So let's do it. Thank you. Thank you.
You know what? It's hard to do a mic drop when you have a lavalier. So that was a beautiful, beautiful speech, and you really said something.
Thanks.
You're on Broadway. Broadway has not always been, Broadway is very changeable, okay? And I, once again, in preparing for this conversation, I learned Broadway started in 1750.
I didn't know that.
Pre-Revolutionary War. Yeah, and it started with one theater on Nassau Street, and then there was an intermission during the Revolutionary War, which is ironic because now the Revolutionary War is on Broadway.
Yes, it is. Spectacularly.
10 minutes. Okay, I'm gonna, you know what? You can research the history of Broadway. Anyway, it's been through a lot. It's been through a lot.
Yeah.
And this year, is one of the years where I feel like a lot has happened to push Broadway forward. You know, one side of Broadway is Disney, and which is, you know, one could argue is great, and it's really entertaining, and it's for a mass audience, right? And then there's another side of Broadway.
Let's not forget also that Disney includes The Lion King, which is actually some of the most abstract art that's ever been on Broadway.
Totally.
And it includes the hyper-representational Aladdin. So Disney is itself a vast spectrum of artisan styles, we'll say.
Theater has the capacity to do this. Art has the capacity to do this. And Hadestown is a primary example from the team that made it, including you, headed the team, to the people on stage. Also, you know, getting an original musical out there.
Yeah.
Something that you created from yes, the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice has been around for a while, but this telling of it and combining it with the other couple, Hades and Persephone. Combining those stories, you know, it's a new thing. You made something brand new.
And by a woman, which is equally, I mean, I think Anais is the 4th woman in Broadway history to have done book and music.
Okay. Cyndi Lauper.
That was Harvey
Sorry,
Firestein.
book and, right,
yeah,
thank you.
To do it all.
Okay, so.
But there's not that many, even just on the music. I mean, yeah. The numbers are low.
What would you like to say, if anything, specifically about what is it? So I'm going to first ask a general question. This is not about you personally. what is it like to be a woman working at this level of theater?
I think, that's interesting. I mean, I know I was acutely aware of being hyper supported in a very particular way when I was doing Comet by, in particular, Neil Mazzella and Sam Ellis, who are the production manager and head at Hudson Scenic, who built our set and also built our set for Hadestown and our royalty, as far as I'm concerned. And they were very careful and thoughtful about helping clear the space for, like, I can remember Neil on a production call being like telling everyone, who's like, everyone quiet. I need to hear what my director wants. Rachel, when do you want costumes on stage? And he was like both clearing the space because I wasn't telling everyone to shut up, because I didn't necessarily know it was my job at the time. And he was also signaling to me, like, this is your job. So it was a remarkable act of grace and very, very understated. So that's one thing that I think of in response to that.
Well, and what I'm now realizing is maybe it's not possible to separate the you from your gender. Do you know what I mean? In asking that question?
Yeah.
Do you find with your level of success now, has anything changed for better or worse in your experience professionally?
I don't know. I mean, certainly it seemed like I remember seeing Julie Taymor and Gary Hines win the Tonys in the same year. That was in my adult lifetime when I watched the Tonys as a young theater artist. So and now I'm the 10th. So clearly there's some accumulation, certainly in the lifetime. And I think there's going to be a lot of female directors, more so on Broadway, of musicals this season. And I don't know a lot, but some. And I hope, and I tried to be really clear about taking the pipeline as an argument just off the table. Like just saying, you can't have that chip in the discussion anymore. So I don't know, but my hope is that a lot of musicals are having their conversations about, well, who do we want to pair with this? And they're still gonna choose Broadway experience a lot of the time, but my hope is that they'll be like, well, who's doing excellent work off Broadway? Because the fundamental problem is the poison that in order to direct on Broadway, you need to be a Broadway director, which means to have directed on Broadway.
Right.
And that's how we get, that's how you get where we are.
Okay. It sounds though, there is though almost a very active role that you're taking in promoting more voices and female voices getting into this mix by now having the power to be able to demand, this is the direction we are going to go in with this.
I mean, hopefully, and it's not just women, it's artists of color. And that's who, like, I'm thinking of to be associates, directors, or, suggesting 4 gigs that I can't do. Sure. And it's definitely not just me. Like it's happened. I got to say it, but that could have been Lee Silverman talking about it. That could have been Liliana Blaine Cruz, and will be someday soon. Lila Noigabout. There's so many women who are ready to give that speech. I just happened to be the one who got to do it this year.
That's very generous. Listen, I have 2 minutes, and then you have to go to that Thai restaurant on your way back to New York.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Maybe my my last question that I'd like to ask you is there anything, first of all, as my Freudian psychoanalyst said to me when I was in therapy many years ago, I'm fine now. I'm fine now. At the end of many sessions would say, you know, there's always more to talk about, which is the truth here as well. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you would like to give to us?
How do you think Broadway's evolving? Because you premiered with a pretty far out show.
Yeah.
And certainly, like, you know, I always remind myself, like, that the Wooster Group was on Broadway also.
Right.
But we forget.
Right.
So
Wooster Group, very experimental theater company.
So I don't know. How do you want to come back?
Do I want to come back?
Yeah.
I would love to. I had a magical time. I was warned by so many people that it was going to be very rough and hard, and that there would be that the commercial voices in the room were going to attempt to shut down the creative voices in the room. But really, sometimes there was conversation, but it was always conversation.
Yeah.
We had an amazing producer, this woman, Eva Price,
Yes.
who I'm hoping will be a guest with us at some point soon. And really, I felt like, and Daniel Fish, the director, is, I can say, completely uncompromising.
Yes.
And so that combination of these two great people they took care of the art in the work, or what they thought the art in the work was, you know, not letting money drive the conversation. And it was successful. When you ask that, I mean, I guess my immediate thought is that I got to be there. So that has changed because I'm from the world of a very obscure world of contemporary concert dance, and that, you know, has an audience of very few people, and I got to sort of share a little bit of what I do, which was a big thrill.
And now you're a Broadway choreographer.
Now I'm a Broadway choreographer.
It's different.
Yes, and that's, by the way, that's why I'm wearing this stuff. This is what I wore to the Tony Awards.
Yes. I'm going to borrow that next time.
You know what? Before you leave, I have a present for you. Do you have a refrigerator?
I do. Well, sort of. We have our Yeti freezer pack that we're traveling with.
Is it made out of metal?
Yes, I have a refrigerator at home.
Okay.
Now I understand what you're asking.
Okay. Do you want corn or a lyric from the show Oklahoma?
Oh, I think corn.
For your refrigerator.
That's really good.
Rachel.
That's really good. It says Oklahoma.
we served corn. Corn was a big part of that show.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about the actual food corn, not corn in the metaphorical sense.
There's a little bit of that.
There was a little bit of that.
Which was nice.
Yes, yes. See, pratfalls and pants dropping
I love it.
is welcome.
Oh my God,
sometimes.
I have a majorly goofy side. Moby Dick has like so much goofiness.
New show. Dave Malloy collaborating.
There's some real, like, I can't, you know, put your head in your hands. You can't believe it's happening.
Oh my God, I know you gotta go, but can you just tell us one thing?
Well, there's a moment that is the top of the Act 2, Section 2, where they go, which is the honor and glory of whaling, where the floor opens and like on a fucking Disney World ride, 4 massive boats come out of the ground and the audience like applauds. I mean, it's amazing.
That sounds spectacular.
And then the audience get in the boats and like get ponchos and get sprayed, and I mean, it's ridiculous.
This is going to Broadway?
That I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. It was definitely not originally commercial in its intentions.
You can tell us. We're
No.
friends.
This show was this show was not designed originally to go to Broadway. Originally, it was conceived of to be like an 8-hour spectacle.
Yeah.
We'll see what it ends up being.
Okay.
I have a meeting with Dave Malloy next week,
Okay.
at which he's going to maybe tell me things about how he's imagining he's going to revise it.
You'll let us know.
Yeah, I'll let you guys know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Listen, I really can't thank you enough for talking
Thank
with
you.
me, for talking with us. Thank you for making this a wonderful inaugural Hop to Broadway
Yeah, thank you
episode.
for being here.
We have a little exit music.
Oh my God.
If you feel like doing a pratfall, there are some stairs. No pressure.
David Newman is so much better at pratfalls.
Okay, I know the conversation's over. We just applied everything. So David Newman. David Newman
is now a Broadway.
Well, he's now a Broadway choreographer. David Newman, who choreographed Hadestown, is this also like downtown modern dance guy. I danced with him in an early version of his company back in the 90s. He made some amazing, amazing work.
He's a beautiful choreographer.
He also is a hilarious.
He's one of the funniest clowns I've ever met.
Yeah. He once did an impression for me of every possible thing that could come out of the human body from all of the orifices if it happened simultaneously. Like all of the things happening all at once. And I mean, literally, like the phone was like, do we push the extra one?
Yeah.
Because we might have to go to the hospital. Like 9-1, we're laughing so hard, like, oh my God, 1, we made it out okay. But it was so funny.
I'm not going to do a pratfall after that description.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, John.
Happy talk, keep talking happy talk. Talk about things you'd like to do.